The human race has been fighting wars for as long as we've been around. But sometimes the reasons we go to war are more ridiculous than others. So today, we're counting down the top 5 wars fought for the most absurd reasons. Starting off in our No. 5 spot, we have the Pig War. This one doesn't seem like it should be real, but it is. And it still blows my mind that people actually fought over this. In 1855, there was an event known as the Pig War that took place in what is today known as San Juan Island in the state of Washington. The war was fought between the United States and Great Britain over a pig. Now, before I continue, let me give you some background information. Both the British and Americans had claimed the same island. So in order to peacefully divide up the land, they agreed to let the status quo stand until a third party could come in and decide. Well, the third party eventually came back and decided to give the island to the United States. The British were not happy with this decision, so they sent in troops to take over the island by force. While the two sides were negotiating, an American settler named Lyman Cutler settled on an area of the island. He brought along his prize pig, which he let loose to roam freely around the island. One day, the British saw the pig rooting around on their side of the island and decided that they needed to kill it. Now, the Americans obviously weren't too happy about this, and the British were also getting annoyed at the Americans being on the island. On October 14, 1855, the British sent over a man named American to tell Cutler to leave, or else he would be considered a trespasser. When Cutler refused to leave, American shot him, after which the British arrested him. This insult to injury caused the U.S. to send over 300 troops to the island, while the British sent 400 of their own troops to counter this. For the next 12 years, these two groups of soldiers just stared each other down on the island, with both sides convinced that they were in the right. Eventually, President Teddy Roosevelt decided to resolve the issue and sent a message to the British government stating, "This is my pig war, and I'm going to end it." A treaty was then made to officially end the conflict and establish a border between the two countries. In our No. 4 spot today, we have the Dungeness War. This is another territorial dispute over land. This time, it was fought between the United States and the British once again, but it wasn't over any livestock. This time, it was over crabs. Starting in the late 1800s, the United States and Great Britain began to dispute over the ownership of the Dungeness War in the Pacific Ocean. The United States believed that the war belonged to them, while the British felt that it should be split evenly between them. To make matters worse, the Dungeness crab was becoming an increasingly valuable resource. So when the war finally broke out over this, it was pretty serious. The war was fought mostly through diplomatic channels with occasional bouts of violence, such as when a U.S. revenue cutter ship detained a British ship for poaching crabs inside American waters. The issue was finally resolved in 1909 when the United States Supreme Court ruled that the rights to this Dungeness crab would go to the state of Washington. In our No. 3 spot today, we have the Banana War. This is probably the least violent entry on this list, but it's also pretty ridiculous if you think about it. In 1923, Colombia and the United States went to war because of a fruit. Okay, to be fair, it wasn't just any fruit. It was a very important fruit, the banana. At the time, the United Fruit Company, which was an American company, had taken over large portions of land in Colombia in order to grow bananas. They had set up their own government in the country, which they ran however they wanted. This caused the Colombians to rise up and fight against them. The U.S. didn't want this, so they sent in the Marines to put down this so-called Banana Rebellion. The war lasted for 6 days with the U.S. easily winning and taking over the country. It quickly reinstated the old government and returned to growing bananas as if nothing had happened. In our No. 2 spot today, we have the Powder River War. This war was fought over a disagreement on where exactly the border should be between the Lakota tribe and white settlers. The white folks thought that the border should be along the North Platte River, while the Native Americans thought that it should be along the South Platte River. Now, to be fair, the Native Americans had been living in the area for centuries, while the white settlers had only been there for a few years. But those few years were enough for them to start claiming all of the land for themselves. In 1864, the white settlers attacked the Native Americans, killing many of them. This caused the Native Americans to unite and fight back against the settlers. The war lasted for a year, with the Native Americans being led by the chief Red Cloud. Eventually, the U.S. government realized that they couldn't win the war, and so they agreed to peace talks. The talks resulted in the creation of the Great Sioux Reservation, which established the border along the North Platte River, just like the white settlers had wanted. In our one spot today, we have the 30 Years' War. This was a crazy war that was fought between various German states from 1618 to 1648. The war was caused by a number of different factors, but one of the main ones was the introduction of new military technology, such as the musket. This new technology made it possible for smaller armies to take on larger ones, which led to a lot of small German states banding together to fight against the bigger ones. Another factor was the introduction of the concept of religious tolerance. At the time, most of Europe was dominated by either Catholicism or Protestantism. But as the 30 Years' War went on, more and more people began to call for religious freedom. This was especially true in Germany, where there was a mix of Catholics, Protestants, and Jews. Eventually, the war ended with the Treaty of Westphalia, which established that each German state could choose their own religion. Thanks so much for watching. That was 5 wars fought for the most absurd reasons. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a big thumbs up and stay tuned for more ridiculous historical stories.